Hey friends, if this is your first time on my channel, you're most definitely welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for sticking with me. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. So today I want to talk about something that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of other people struggle with as well, so I want to address it. And really what we're going to talk about today is why you're not doing well in your pre-med classes. So we're going to really talk about what's really going on, and I'm hoping that this video can help you think about ways to evaluate yourself and figure out what the problem is and how to address it. Because the truth is, you have to do well in school to get into medical school. There's really no way around it, and I want to make sure you guys are catching red flags ahead of time before you get to a place like me where my GPA was like below a 3.0 for like all of my college career, just my science. It's very frustrating when you're not doing well in school, and I understand that, and it can really make you feel like there's something wrong with you and you're not quite sure, like, what am I not doing correctly? The first thing you have to check is your mental health. Are you doing okay? Are you in a good headspace? If you are dealing with a lot of stuff, you're not gonna do well in school. That's what I believe, right? I know walking into my freshman year, this was like a transition into a new environment. I moved across the country. I was in a school that was really, really hard, that I wasn't really being used to being challenged with myself. And at the same time, I didn't really feel like I fit in with anyone at Stanford at the time. So I was going through a lot personally. Like, you know, you're dealing with depression, you have a lot of things going on at home, whatever it is, you really honestly have to take care of your mental health first. And that's the first thing I had to do. I really had to sit myself down and say, okay, we're feeling this way, and it's kind of a cycle, it feeds into each other. You're not doing well in school, so you become sad and depressed. You're depressed because you're not doing well in school, and then they're like, it just kind of like, you know, snowballs. And you really have to figure out, how can I get help, you know? And I know most schools will have some kind of CAP, psychological services. If you can see a therapist, talking to a trusted person will really help. But you really do need to reach out for that support to get your mind right, because once your mind is right, I think that is like, makes the job of doing well in school a lot more easy. The next thing you have to address is if you have poor study habits. You cannot expect to do well in school and you're not putting in the work. It just does not work like that. If you know you're not reviewing the material before lecture, and then you get to lecture and you're confused as F, it's because you didn't review the material, you know? Or if you know that you're waiting until a week before your exam to study, the chances of you reviewing like a quarter's worth of work is going to be a lot harder to master in that week. So you really have to address, am I studying properly? And you have to ask yourself, am I doing everything I can do to do well in this class? Because you can be doing something and it doesn't work, right? I think the beauty of studying is that you try things, it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, okay, I have to try something new. But when I was evaluating myself, I had to say, okay, am I doing every single thing in my power to get an A in this class? And if the answer was no, I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to write down everything I was doing and all the things I could be doing, because if you're not putting your all into studying, you're not going to get the results you want. And there are some people who you do put in the work and you're not getting the results you want. You may want to push yourself a bit further. What could I have done better? Or what could I have done more? My senior year, when I took my first exam for biochem, I had gotten like a D, and I was so sad because that was 15% of my grade, and I was like, okay, we're not going to leave this class with an A anymore because we just got a D on this first midterm. And after being upset about the exam, and said to myself, okay, what did I do studying for this exam? Like, I knew I had done the practice exams that they offered. I reviewed our lecture notes. You know, I knew I'd done everything, but I still didn't do well. And I think what it came down to is I didn't realize how much general chemistry I needed for that exam, and how much general chemistry I needed to have reviewed and studied in order to do well on that first exam, because that exam was some general chemistry heavy. And because I didn't understand that concept and I didn't fully master that, that's why I didn't do well. So I had to tell myself, okay, for the next unit, I need to make sure I am evaluating every single thing that this unit is about, and if I need background knowledge to pull from another class, I have to do that work. I hadn't studied any general chemistry stuff, and I had kind of ignored it because I was like, this is a biochem class. How much general chemistry are they going to put on the first exam? And look how that worked out for me. If you're not doing practice problems, that's also an issue too. One thing I found with a lot of pre-med classes and science classes is you have to practice to understand the material. You can't just take pages and pages of notes and think that you understand the material. You have to practice it, because on the exam, they're not going to ask you to regurgitate the information. You have to apply the concepts, the principles, and I found that practice problems have really improved my performance in pre-med classes because I'm going above and beyond. I'm not just doing the work that they require me to do, I'm doing more so that I learn and know the material. Another thing is you are in too many extracurricular activities. You're doing too much. You're like trying to be the president of this, trying to be the vice president of this, trying to be the event committee chair of this, X, Y, and Z. If you're doing too many extracurricular activities and your grades are suffering, your priorities are misplaced, my dear. I'm sorry to say, but it's true, because I remember at an interview I had for medical school, one of my interviewers at this medical school was the dean of multicultural affairs and global health. And she, when I tell you, homegirl had looked through my application in depth. She had notes upon notes of things she wanted to ask me. And one of the things she asked me was, what do you want me to say that to the admission committee? You haven't done well in terms of science classes, you haven't done well for most of your college career. So what do you want me to tell them? And she said, when I look at your application, you were into a lot of stuff. You were in a lot of extracurricular activities. You were in the African Student Association, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. You had multiple hours of X, Y, and Z. And one thing she had told me is there are two kinds of students I see in medical school. The one who was doing too much and it caught up with them and now their grades, they're on the verge of being asked to leave the school. And the other one is they never asked for help in terms of they just didn't understand the material or, you know, X, Y, and Z. And she said, how do I know you're not going to be one of those students who you're doing too much that you let your grades slip in medical school? And y'all, that question blew me. Like I was shocked. I was dumbfounded when she asked me that question. And what it told me is that medical schools do pay attention to this. They are looking at your extracurricular activities and they're also looking at your grades and they're looking at the timeline. And I had to explain to her why I was in so many different activities, but my grades weren't as popping as my extracurricular activities. And it's really, really important that you have to tell yourself, if you need to remove yourself from something, you have to do that. My senior year, I was not involved in as many things as I was freshman to junior year. And that's just the truth, because I had to prioritize my academics. And you have to make that decision of what comes first. Am I gonna prioritize all these extracurricular activities, or am I gonna make sure I'm doing well in school? And if you're not doing well in school, you need to drop those other things. And that's the truth, because 1,000 hours of shadowing a doctor doesn't mean anything if you are pushing a 2.5 science GPA. Now here's the truth of the matter. Learning comes hard for a lot of people. I am one of those people that, especially in higher education, learning has been really, really hard for me. Being able to master material is really, really hard for me, and I've had to figure out what works for me in order to do well. I know that I cannot get away with doing well in a class if I'm not doing 1,000% extra work than other people around me. I have to put in that work. And you really have to decide and tell yourself, is this important to me? You know, is getting into medical school important to me? Is doing well in school important to me? And it should be. And you have to tell yourself, yes, learning this material is hard. Organic chemistry is really, really hard for me. Biochemistry is really hard for me. Biology is really hard for me, but it's not hard for me to overcome. You know, you have to get into that mindset of, this is a hard class. Maybe you don't really do well in science classes, but you gotta tell yourself, I am gonna do well. If you continue to tell yourself, pre-med classes are the worst for me, or I can never do well in pre-med classes, guess what, boo-boo? You're not gonna do well. You're not. So you really wanna make sure that you acknowledge how hard it will be to do well in school, but that you can rise to the occasion. You are able to do anything you put your mind to, because the truth is, like I said, you cannot get away with a low GPA if you want to get into medical school. You can't. And it's really, really important that you address it sooner rather than later, because it's a lot easier to rectify maybe 1/4 of bad grades versus, like me, 3 years of bad grades. It's a lot easier to fix that. And let me tell you, your GPA drops faster than it rises. It really does. So you want to make sure when you don't do well in one science class, that same time you get the grade back, you need to figure out, how can I fix this? Do not wait until you're 3 years in and you're like, ooh, wow, my GPA is not that great, before you do something about it. So I hope this video was helpful. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Subscribe. I lost 4 subscribers yesterday and I was so sad about it. So we gotta make those subscribers up. And I will see you guys in another video.